To the United Nations, His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Riyad Mansour. Let me first read his biodata. Dr. Riyad Mansour was born to a refugee family that lived in the city of Ramallah in the occupied West Bank in 1967.
Which is indeed a venue for dialogue and rendezvous with the mind of all elements of the nations, the religious leaders, also the domicile of the Interreligious Council of Indonesia.
As Palestinians. And I will share with you some of the scholarly research about the subject to demonstrate a point that fits within, your tradition here in Indonesia and the different religious groups, cultural groups who are coexisting in harmony. With regard to the first subject, you are all aware of the fact that since the signing of the Oslo Agreement more than 20 years ago, the Palestinian side pursued a course of negotiation on all final status issues such as Jerusalem, refugees, borders, etc., with the Israeli side in good faith, with the view of putting an end to Israeli occupation within a span of 5 years and the actualization of the independence of the state of Palestine. Us Palestinians, regardless of our religion, whether we are Muslims, Christians, whether some of us practice their religions and those who do not practice, Jerusalem is the heart of the Palestine question. And Al-Aqsa Mosque and Al-Haram Sharif is the heart of the heart. And when you incite us vis-a-vis Al-Haram Sharif and Al-Aqsa Mosque, you outrage the entire Palestinian population. And I am sure it would be outraging the entire Arab population and the Muslim Ummah everywhere. In Palestine, for Muslims, the two holiest places is Al-Aqsa Mosque. That 90% of the population of Jerusalem are Hebronite, meaning they migrated from Hebron to that segment of our population that is defending the city, defending the holy site in it, and trying to keep it. Or with Asfahan or with Istanbul, I guess, they have the right to do so. But nobody has the right to have a real estate to your properties, to your countries, and to your places in Cairo, in Asfahan, in Istanbul, except the people who have been living there in these areas. That is also applicable to us, the Palestinian people, including in Jerusalem. Cannot stop without significant concession from the occupied Israeli authority. Although it's difficult now to try to articulate what these concessions should be. But I can tell you that the first thing that needs to be done, the Israeli militaristic formation, whether the army or the armed settlers or the vigilantes that the mayor of West Jerusalem and the settlers in East Jerusalem, who claims to be the mayor of the unified city, who is calling for Jews who are not in the armed services, who have permits to go and carry guns and weapons to create an additional militia in Jerusalem. We believe that these all militaristic formation, they need to be removed away from the point of frictions with the Palestinian people. They have the courage to do what they do. I think that this is a source of admiration to the courage of the Palestinian youth in resisting occupation. And we totally reject the Israeli characterization of this resistance as terrorism. The true terrorists are those who would burn alive the Dawabshe family, including a toddler 18 months old, and they did not arrest those who committed that heinous crime and to put them to face justice. Or 16 bullets on the body of a young Palestinian man and woman. Justice is being practiced at the form of state terrorism by the Israeli occupying army. Occupation in itself, we would like to remind Jews of what happened during, the Warsaw Uprising. If you review what Hitler and the Nazis were characterizing, the behavior of the Jews in resisting the ruthlessness of the Nazis in the Warsaw Uprising, the words of the Nazis at that time were, those were terrorists about the Jews. Of 78% of the territory of the State of Israel, and ours, which is fighting for its independence, in 22% of the land. And yet, they are not accepting it. They want the whole thing, and they dream, and more than they dream, they work in trying to negate our existence, which will never be accomplished. The pillars of the State of Palestine in the international arena, and exercising our right as a responsible state. You cannot imagine the amount of enthusiasm by the international community every time they see us, for example, participating in voting as a state party in this convention or that convention. They love to see Palestine taking its place among the international community. And this is not only a small group of nations, it's almost the great majority of nations. In fact, today, the General Assembly will be voting on the self-determination resolution. Let me conclude with our tradition and history of tolerance. One time I was visiting our ambassador at UNESCO, who is a very scholar and a thorough researcher of different parts of our history. And he is the one who translated to French the poetry of our most famous poet, Darwish. And for those of you who can navigate through French, you will see that this is not a simple translation. Of course, if you translate poetry, and if you are really a scholar in that language, then you can truly translate it with improvisation, that as if you are the one who is composing that poetry in that language. He is of that caliber. So he told me two interesting things about our history. One, he told me that in 1860, 1870, 5 consulate or representative of European countries were roaming Palestine, especially in the Galilee area, which is an area in Palestine heavily populated by Christians. And during the same period of time, there was a religious confrontation in Lebanon, just a few kilometers up the borders, between Muslims, Christians, Maronite, Druze. And of course, Western powers played a role in that religious confrontation to justify intervention and to take control of that region from the Ottoman Empire. So those counselors, diplomats, used to go to Palestinian Christians in the Galilee and try to invite them or ask them, why don't you go and fight with your brother Christians just only a few kilometers up the road in Lebanon against the Muslims and the Druze? And they were stunned in their reports, and these are public records now for those of you who are interested in these records. The Viennese diplomat, the British diplomat, the Italian, the French, the German, these are I think the 5. They were amazed that not a single Palestinian would buy that stories and accept to go and fight as they were inviting them. And then they were asking them to send, and they sent in these reports, why are you that way? There's only maybe 10, 15, 20 kilometers between you and the north borders. Why are you so different than those up north in Lebanon? And the common answer was that we Palestinians, we lived on the culture of harmony and coexistence between religious groups. We were never taught that Christians should fight Muslims, and Muslims were never taught to go and fight Christians. So I'm just giving you one example of, who we are and how we were brought up. And in fact, when many of the Jewish immigrants came to Palestine, initially we were harboring them and receiving them with, in a friendly way. And we did not initiate hostility from them until they started forming quasi-militias and started, showing hostility against us. In this regard, he told me the other story. He said, the British Corps of Engineers sent an expedition to Palestine from 1860 to 1880 to survey everything in Palestine. And he rolled in front of me a carpet, a map, from here to there. And of course now it's record, you can buy it from the archives in England. In that survey, over 20 years, they surveyed every valley, every mountain, every cave, every spring, every important building in Palestine. They marked 860 sites that were revered by Muslims, Christians, and Jews. So, in his book about our identity, who are we, the Palestinians? Of course, his assertion is that we are Canaanite. Once upon a time, somebody came from Mesopotamia to Al-Khalid, Sayyiduna Ibrahim. He advocated something new, which is to believe in one God, versus those at that time who believed in so many different gods. And it took the Palestinians, the Canaanite, hundreds of years before accepting this new religion, the majority of them. As in your case, it took probably hundreds of years before you accepted from the Sufis to become Muslims. It took, you took your time, and through conviction, you arrived at that is the religion that should be adopted by the majority of Indonesians.
Situasi from bad to worse, dari buruk malah semakin buruk. Because of the bad faith on the Israeli heart, karena ketidaketulusan dari pihak Israel. The deadlock, the blockade, the deadlock of negotiations, and the discriminations against the Palestinian people have caused great suffering among them. Jadi blokade, lalu diskriminasi dan perilaku yang tidak sepatutnya telah mengakibatkan penderitaan yang luar biasa bagi masyarakat Palestina.
But we know that Hezbollah is something like free, independent military group, because they also fighting in Lebanon and everywhere. So what is in the world? So thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
All about related to the last question for the gentleman at the back. With the situation within the Palestine, I think it is quite unfortunate for Palestine, and I think this is kind of the problem to achieve the full independence for Palestine, to get the independence, especially from the Middle East countries, because I saw since the beginning.
Mengenai solusi dua negara apakah masih relevan atau masih dengan kondisi pemuda-pemuda Palestina saat ini?
New York and in Washington, D.C. And I personally attended with him 2 of these encounters. And it is more popular, frankly speaking, among intellectuals and among city dwellers, among Palestinians and in the Arab countries, and among those who are very far away from the land of conflict, are going to treat us as equal unless we are separated in our own independent state, so that they can wake up from their arrogance and from the way they treat us as,
Kristiani yang menganggap Yerusalem sebagai dua kota sucinya, dan banyak lagi kota-kota suci di sana, untuk menunjukkan solidaritas dengan mendukung lewat jalan resmi, jalan formal. Kalau bantuan kita akhirnya jatuh ke grup-grup di Palestina, ini akan potensial untuk menimbulkan perpecahan itu terus-menerus. Saya tidak paham yang saya maksudkan, karena ada kawan-kawan kita memilih jalan yang lain. Tapi prakarsa persahabatan Indonesia-Palestina, Indonesia-Palestine Friendship Initiative menempuh jalan resmi, dan kita bekerjasama dengan Kemlu, Foreign Ministry, as well as the Embassy of the State of Palestine in Jakarta. On behalf of...
My goodness, this is the ramen style. Because at the present of it's being documented for pictures. What happened to the color like yours?
Yeah, this is that color. This is a Palestinian color.
This is not 50 patient.
Yes.
I'm feeling it much better.
Much better than
Oh, fit.
You know your size.
You know my size?
I will send you.
They know your size. They know my size. This is enough. This is enough? Tomorrow I have a meeting in the foreign ministry. Maybe I should go this way. What do you think? I was hoping for this color. Okay, we send it to you. This is in the local language, don't expect
Walaupun juga kepentingannya berbeda antara negara yang satu dan negara lain, antara negara Islam dengan Amerika, dengan Prancis di dalam memerangi ISIS yang bisa boleh jadi dan boleh musuh bersama. Tapi kalau sudah menyangkut seperti yang termasuk juga Syria, walaupun di situ ada konflik antara kelompok penguasa